Okay, good evening everyone. Welcome to our evening Dhamma. Tonight we're looking at right effort. So the Buddha was quite adamant about the importance of effort. He said it is by effort that one overcomes suffering. Viriyena dukkha majjeti. He said at one point, I think something like, "Tell me, monks, what cannot be achieved by striving?" Of course, the Buddha had such a memory of the things he'd accomplished by striving, and the realization that there's very little that can't be accomplished if you work at it. It's an interesting aspect of the worldview of rebirth that takes away the limits on what's possible for a being to accomplish, right? Because a human being can only accomplish so much. No human being is ever going to travel to the edge of the universe. Not physically. Well, and not today anyway. It's not going to happen the way things are, but the potential for it is always there, far beyond what we normally think possible. Of course, because based on our state of mind, our next existence, our state of being might be quite different. And we talk about beings like angels and gods. And the potential for that sort of an existence, I mean, it changes everything really as far as what's possible. So the Buddha stressed this quite a bit, how through effort things are accomplished, not by lack of effort. But it's important to understand this in a sort of a nuanced way, because the ordinary way of approaching effort is to just push ahead. Just work. Push yourself to limit and push yourself beyond your limit. And to some extent that's what we do in meditation, right? Our limits of pain, we push ourselves beyond them. Our limits of patience, we certainly push ourselves beyond those limits. But the goal really isn't to be working. I mean, it's not to feel like work. A lot of people talk about meditation being effortless, and of course that's a very dangerous thing to say, because it's very easy to get lazy. It's easy to mix effortlessness with laziness. Being lazy is quite effortless, right? It doesn't take a lot of effort, or so it seems. I think ultimately the word effortlessness is a useful description, but effortlessness only comes when you have perfect effort. Because laziness, in fact, is quite stressful. Have you ever tried lying in bed all day? You can't do it for even an hour or two. It's quite stressful. In fact, the meditation isn't stressful at all. It's to some extent our laziness or our inefficiency. Problem is not the meditation, it's that we're not very good at it. Like anything, like any training. And when you get really good at it, it is quite seemingly effortless, but it's misleading because there's a lot of effort. It's just the effort is effortless. You don't have to work because you're good at working. And it's a point that I think we don't often, or that we don't realize, is that the natural state, the perfect natural state, is not one of, it's not lazy. It's not a state of 0, it's a state of 100. Perfect. Perfect efficiency. An enlightened being has perfect energy. They are unflagging, unrelentingly mindful. They are constantly engaged in wholesomeness. Their mind is so full of energy. It's an important point to realize. If you feel tired, if you feel like you're pushing yourself to meditate, this isn't the problem with the meditation. This is what we have to get rid of. Effort is not feeling like you're pushing yourself. Effort is getting rid of the laziness. It's getting rid of the imbalance. Once everything is balanced, it feels like there's nothing there. It feels like a perfectly tuned musical instrument. Right? You only notice when the instrument is out of tune. If you untune one of the strings, then you notice something's there. Once it's in tune, you stop noticing. There's harmony. That's what it feels like. So right effort. Right effort isn't so much about pushing yourself. It's much more about focusing and directing your attention, directing your efforts rightly. So all the striving to gain and acquire things that can't possibly satisfy us, we give that up in favor of striving for not striving, really. Striving for a perfectly tuned state of being. So there are 4 right efforts, and it's quite a simple formula. You have wholesomeness and you have unwholesomeness. So it's about orienting our efforts properly. Unwholesomeness that hasn't arisen, it takes effort to keep it from arising. Right? When you see something that you want, it takes effort to just see it. When you hear some noise that would disturb you, takes effort. Effort to stay mindful so that everything we experience, when pain arises, to experience it just as pain and not let the unwholesomeness arise. That's right effort. Unwholesomeness is of 3 kinds. There's unwholesome actions. This is when you act or speak. That's what we've been talking about recently. When you act or speak in an unwholesome manner. This is wrong action, wrong speech. This is the vitakama kilesa. This means things that are expressed. I talk about this. The second type of unwholesomeness is called pariyuttana kilesa or akusala. This is in the mind, thoughts. So preventing your thoughts from turning to unwholesomeness takes effort. And anusaya, the third one is anusaya. These are defilements that haven't yet arisen. Or these are the tendencies, rooting them out. Anyway, so the first one is to not have them arise. mainly the first two, I guess. Put out effort not to kill and not to steal, that kind of thing. Put out effort to prevent bad thoughts, unwholesome thoughts. And those that have arisen, unwholesomeness that has arisen, you make effort to dispel them. So when anger or greed arise, do what you can to get rid of them. There's the question, how do you get rid of bad thoughts? How do you get rid of your unpleasant, unwholesome emotions? How do you get rid of anger? It's an important question. It's one that is dealt with in the Buddha's teaching. There are different ways. Our ordinary way is to try and push it away. This is what you might say is effort. You might think it's right effort to force yourself not to get angry. You might think it's right effort to cultivate love when you're angry, for example, or cultivate dispassion when you're passionate. Find some way to cultivate the opposite. And this works temporarily. I mean, this sort of effort is beneficial in a temporary sense, but in insight meditation, in mindfulness meditation, right effort for us is to understand things like greed and anger, to understand our defilements. So the effort that we put out is not to get rid of things, it's not to change, it's not to fix, it's to understand. When you have something that's causing you stress or suffering, if you have pain, try to understand the pain. And when you don't like it, try to understand the disliking, rather than reacting to it, getting upset by it. When you have emotions of fear or worry, liking or disliking, try and learn about those emotions. This takes effort, Mindfulness, the quality of mindfulness, it manifests itself as confronting the objective field, so it doesn't waver, it doesn't run away from it, doesn't chase it away, doesn't cling to it. The effort to just stand your ground, not be moved, not be shaken by experiences, to just stay with it. It takes quite effort just to understand something. This is the change that has to come about, so that eventually, over time, we see things objectively as they are without reacting to them. And the other two, so these are the first two types of right effort. Preventing unwholesomeness from arising, and removing unwholesomeness that has already arisen. The other two are regards to wholesomeness. Wholesomeness that has not yet arisen, work to give rise to it. Work to do good deeds is a very simple way. You want to learn right effort, do good things, be charitable, be ethical, practice meditation. Cultivate wholesome mind states, loving kindness, for example, concentration, practice tranquility meditation. These are all good things. Of course, in an ultimate sense, it means cultivating mindfulness and wisdom, the highest, best wholesomeness, are mindfulness and wisdom. So the right effort to be mindful, this is the awakening that happens during the course. You start to see yourself. You start to really be here and now. This is giving rise to a new sort of wholesomeness. It's not just being a kind or nice person. It's being a wise and clear-minded person. When you close your eyes and you see yourself, the physical and the mental, It's giving rise to something new, a new state, a state of mind that is objective, clear, wise, that sees things as they are. And then protect that. The fourth one is when wholesomeness has arisen, once you're being mindful, work to keep it. And this is really the trick as you go on in the practice. You'll be meditating, you'll be mindful, and then your mind slips off. It's very easy to get distracted, very hard to pull yourself back again. So you work to stay on that razor's edge of the present moment. It's not something you can get stuck on. If you get lazy, you get carried away, swept away. You have to keep yourself constantly here, now, again and again and again. That's why we use the mantra. It's kind of like a rope to pull us back to the present moment. So when we engage in good deeds, when we avoid unwholesomeness, this is right effort. Vidiyena dukkha majjeti. Through effort we overcome suffering. It's just important to understand what is right effort. Again, not just pushing yourself, but building up the effort to just be, the effort to observe objectively and mindfully in the present moment. So that's the brief teaching on right effort. Thank you all for tuning in. Let's see if there are questions. Oh, a bunch of questions. Right, I've been away for a few days. You all should just go. Please don't stay for this. What's the delay when I become aware of a thought after it arises? Is it possible to reduce that delay? Yes, for sure. As you cultivate the practice over time, you get more skilled at it. But it takes work and it takes time. If you're interested in cultivating that, I'd encourage you to do a meditation course. You'll find you're better able to catch the thoughts earlier, especially during the course itself. I have a lot of anger. Sometimes I feel I'll never be able to remove it. Been meditating for 3 years, but decide to give it up because it's too difficult. What can I do? I feel hopeless. Well, the first step, or one of the important steps of meditation, is to see that you can't remove it, to stop trying to remove it. That's self, that's ego, that's this control. Stop trying to get rid of the anger. Start trying to understand it. That's not an easy thing, and it's not just going to fix your problem. Stop trying to fix it. Stop seeing it as a problem. Anger is just anger. And break it up. It's not just the anger, it's also the pain that it brings you and the physical sensations of heat and frustration and stress. And break it up with the thoughts about the anger, the thoughts that lead to the anger, that kind of thing. They're separate. All these things are separate from each other. The experiences that make you angry, seeing, hearing, whatever. As you can probably see now, that giving up wasn't the answer either. Giving up didn't free you from the anger. But giving up can be useful. When you give up meditating, for example, that can be a useful moment because it's a moment of realizing, I can't fix this. It's an important realization in meditation. So when that happens, start meditating again. You'll find it's probably easier because you're less inclined to try to get rid of it. Thus, of course, then you're less angry as a result. Said something like, it's not about feeling happy. Happiness comes from not feeling at all. Well, that's not quite what I said. But so feeling happy means to feel something that we like and that we're attached to or we desire. That we like. But that's not real happiness, because those feelings come and they go, and they actually don't mean anything in the end. It's just our judgment that leads us to like them, and that liking, of course, leads to further clinging and frustration when we don't get what we want, and so we're constantly in this push and pull, and it's not really happiness. Happiness comes when you're free from all that, and freedom from all that has nothing to do with feeling. So that's sort of a basic answer to your question, without going into too much detail. Is it problematic to have ambitions? What drives someone to meditate? Well, ambition often drives someone to meditate, but I think ambition's probably not the right word in most cases. What drives people to meditate is suffering and a desire for freedom, to be free from suffering. And it is desire in many cases. It's aversion to suffering. And that's not good, but it's good in that it leads you to meditate. Once you start to meditate, you start to see that aversion is the real problem. The aversion from suffering. If you free yourself from that and you can learn to look at the suffering, you find it doesn't cause you suffering, and you'll really just let go of it. But yes, ambitions generally are problematic because they're clinging. It's not being objective, and you're unable to see things as they are when you have ambition. Are all forms of sexual indulgence inherently dukkha, or can sexual experiences give rise to positive mind states? If expressed with loving kindness and non-attachment, can sex be a liberating practice of compassion and equanimity? Hey, I think you're stretching it. I don't know. Can it be? Sure. Is it likely to be? I'm not convinced. Because see, an enlightened being, let's take our prime example of the enlightened being. Really talk about the unenlightened being. The problem with it is that it's something that leads to great pleasure, right? And for two enlightened beings, it wouldn't be a problem to engage in sexual intercourse. I mean, they'd have no reason to. It's sort of something that provides no purpose and serves no purpose for an enlightened being. But for unenlightened people, for anyone who wants to have sex, there's an attachment to the pleasure. So technically, yes, it's possible to do anything. I mean, it's possible. It's possible to do pretty much anything. I'm just trying to think how far you can go with that. The point is, an enlightened being wouldn't have sex because there's no point, there's no benefit to it. But for anyone who's not enlightened, anyway, it's not the action. Let's put it that way. Put it really simple. It's the state of mind. So, I mean, your question is kind of, I'm not clear on, I think the wording could be changed a bit. Sexual indulgence is not inherently dukkha. And an act can never be unwholesome in itself. It's the mind states associated with the action that are unwholesome. So, well, I mean, for example, take rape. There was this case of an enlightened bhikkhuni who was raped, and it was nothing to her. While it was happening, she said to the person doing it, this is bad for you. They didn't think of herself. She said, think about what you're doing, this is really a terrible thing that you're doing to yourself. So there was no defilement there. But your question is whether it's inherently dukkha, and if you're talking about it inherently being suffering, well, and again getting back to the meaning of dukkha, but every sankhara is dukkha. So of course sexual indulgence falls under that category, meaning it's none of it going to make you happy. Well, okay, so can sexual experience give rise to wholesome mind states? So here's the question. I mean, who can have sexual intercourse without it giving rise to unwholesomeness? If you're asking whether it's entirely unwholesome, the answer, of course, is no. I mean, many people who have sex do it out of love as well. They love the other person, so there are positive mind states there as well. Could you be mindful having sex? I think absolutely, yes. It doesn't take away the fact that it's probably quite unwholesome. But I would say if you're going to have sexual intercourse, do it mindfully. For sure. I mean, and I would for sure say that there is the potential for wholesomeness. It's not a high potential, of course, because I'm very much caught up in the pleasure of the act. But the point being that there is no act that is either wholesome or unwholesome, and acts don't exist in themselves. What exists is moments of experience. So suppose you're having sexual intercourse, there's going to be moment after moment after moment, and each moment has the potential to be wholesome or unwholesome. What we look at is, on the whole, sexual intercourse is generally unwholesome. So that's the reason for eventually giving it up. And if you're dedicated to the practice, giving it up, becoming a monastic or that kind of thing. Why do the bhikkhus shave their eyebrows in Thailand? There's no real good reason. I mean, these aren't the questions. It's not a bad question. It's against the rules. We don't answer these sorts of questions, but I'm not going to just outright dismiss it. But there's no good reason. It's pretty a mundane answer to that question. I wouldn't spend too much time worrying about that. Right livelihood. Is it immoral to do sometimes work without paying taxes? And you have more money while you need less work. So you have more energy. Avoiding taxes is problematic. Some people would say it's stealing. You're stealing money. Because theft has a lot to do with the government. It has a lot to do with the society, but it's a very complicated question because sometimes governments steal money from people. I mean, many people think of taxes as theft. The only record that we have regarding taxes is seeing tax evasion as theft. And the idea being that you really have to follow the government rule in that regard. If you don't pay taxes, you're stealing. So I'd be careful there. I don't know. I mean, I'm not convinced entirely of that. But it's something to keep in mind. I mean, I don't think, as with many questions like this, there's no real set answer. It's a question about being mindful in the present moment and reacting and interacting mindfully with your situation. But if it's just about, more money, less work, that's not a very good reason. Because you could rob a bank, that's not so much work. No, it's a lot of work, but find ways to get very, very rich doing very, very bad things. To talk a little bit on what it's like to be a monk. No. Sorry. I mean, there's not much secret about it. Monks do many different kinds of things, but the important thing is that you're meditating. The important thing is that you're cultivating mindfulness and morality and so on. Can monks adopt children? Again, not really the sort of question we're looking at. But the answer, I think, is pretty much no. It's actually not adopt, but take care of kids, yes. Monks can take care of kids, that's true. My mind wanders to old feelings, especially for old lovers. These feelings do not bother me, but while meditating they can tear me away from my focus. Well, focus on them. That should be your focus. When these thoughts arise, take them as your meditation object. You're seeing how your mind works, that the mind is chaotic, that the mind is unpredictable, and that helps you to let go, to stop trying to keep your mind from thinking certain things and so on. So when you say it tears you away from your focus, well, welcome to reality. That's the way the world works. We're constantly being pulled and pushed and so on, and that helps us let go, helps us see the stress inherent in samsara and let go. Is having passion a good or a bad thing? Passion generally a bad thing, yes. It's again like ambition, it drags you on and it cultivates preference and so on. Ego, it cultivates lots of bad things. Should awareness be observed as something that is already there or as something that arises with objects of mind? Awareness arises with objects of mind. Consciousness. Consciousness is one of the 5 aggregates, and they arise together with every experience. But if by awareness you mean meditative awareness, that's even different, because that doesn't always arise with every mind state. But when you're mindful, when you cultivate mindfulness, then it will arise with the mind state, or with the object. Okay, and that's the questions for tonight. Thank you. I hope I wasn't overly dismissive or smug. Thank you.